on grassroots interventions. We're going to be focusing on grassroots intervention, the role of civil society in advancing gender equality through sports. The theme of this panel is addressing menstrual health, mental well-being, education, and sustainable livelihood through PEPAS, which is sports. My first speaker is going to be Miss Natasha Brennan-Kamp. Natasha is the program manager for the Sports Development Program and has led the sports program since 2011. She's been involved in sports developments throughout her career and is deeply committed to mental wellness through sports and mentoring young people for life success. Our next speaker is going to be Miss Adele Bruggeman. Welcome. Sorry, technology is letting me down, but we're going to be sorted now. Adele Bruggeman is a seasoned soccer and lacrosse goalie with over a decade of experience at the intersection of sports and social good. Passionate about gender equality, community developments, and social business, she has collaborated with organizations worldwide to drive transformative change. And our next speaker is Miss Nikki van der Merwe from Wave of Change. Ms. Nikki van der Merwe is the director at Waves for Change, responsible for the monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning of the organization's programs. With over 15 years of experience in both quantitative and qualitative MERL, which she's going to explain to us now, in the development sector. She leads her team to ensure high-quality data collection, analysis, and reporting for funders and stakeholders. And then lastly, we've got Miss Akona Makalima. Ms. Akona Makalima is a South African female football professional referee with multiple medals from CAF tournaments as well as FIFA tournaments. Do you guys even remember my name? So in this session, we are going to be talking about addressing menstrual health, mental well-being, education, and sustainable livelihood through PEPAS. And my first question will go to Ms. Natasha. So, welcome, firstly. Can you please tell us a bit about Grootbos Foundation?
So the Grootbos Foundation is an organization out in Gansbaai, which is about 2 hours from where we currently sit. And the Grootbos Foundation is a holistic program that focuses on the sustainability of our fauna and flora, but also focus on community. So we've got a focus on conservation, and we've got a focus on community as well to have that overall reach within the Gansbaai community. And so I head up the sports program, which focuses on youth and sport development, and then multi-sports as well as educational-based programs, covering a variety of programs like the menstrual health, mental well-being, partners with grassroots soccer through HIV awareness. We have ocean conservation through another partner, Oceans for Alliance. We partnered with Waves for Change. So through a lot of our partner organizations within the multiple sports development areas, focusing on what we can do to lift the community of Gansbaai and give the kids as much opportunities and avenues to venture into so that ultimately becomes sustainable livelihoods for the young generation and for Gansbaai.
And what led to the factors, what are the factors that led to the foundation obviously introducing a menstrual health program?
So, as we were all speaking about female participation and what are the barriers to female participation, and one of the barriers that we noted is that we had young girls in the program, and then when they get the puberty age, they drop off the map, and then later on they come back. And we had to dig a little bit deeper to why that is. And one of the problems were that it was the menstrual health. They have now reached puberty, they now have got their periods, but the stigma around it in our small townships, the cost that goes involved with having pads, and what we noted is that they weren't only just missing sport, but they were missing school as well. And so to get to the root of the problem and to have more engagement, it was how do we address that problem? And that is what the start of our menstrual health program, where we not only educate the community and the young girls about menstrual health, but also offer sanitary pads for free for the community. And it's not just for the young beneficiaries in our program, but it's for the mothers, the sisters, the aunts and uncles. So we've got multiple points where they can access the sanitary pads, whether it's in school, whether it's in community projects, whether it's child welfare programs. So anywhere that they might have access to it, they are able to go and get a pack of pads for free when it is that time of the month, without having to fill out anything, without having to look at having it be tasteful as possible to get this and be as discreet as possible without having to ooh, you've got your periods, but also making them realize that it's normal. This is a normal part of young women, this is a normal part. So we go into the schools to educate the young girls that this is going to happen. And when it does happen, it's not something that you have to be fearful of. This is what you can do. And with this, you continue to play sport, continue to go to school. That is one barrier that will help them to navigate the future without having that one speed bump, so to say. So what we can limit as much as possible at our discretion is something as simple as opportunity for pads for all. So, yeah.
All right. That, that is very important, actually. I think I remember back in primary school, there was a situation where, remember, during the epidemic, there were child-led homes, and then we had this one learner in our class who went on our period, and we were in grade 6, so we didn't know what was happening. Yeah. And then she went on her period, and it was so embarrassing. And in my head, I thought someone had violated her or something. Like, I was very confused. So having programs like that actually also teaches us about sexual health as well as young children is very, very important, especially also in the sports industry. Now moving on to Adele, who believes that sports sampling is very important in the development of girls in sports as a whole. Why is it important?
Yes. So before I answer that question, I actually want to engage the audience really quickly. Raise your hand if you played sports growing up. Raise your hand if you played multiple sports growing up. So maybe soccer, maybe netball, maybe some different sports. Raise your hand if you're a professional athlete today. There's a few of them here, and it's incredible to see that journey. But for me, I think this is the crux of the narrative, right? Is that, first of all, girls are having sporting opportunities much later than boys. And so when sporting opportunities are available to girls, it's oftentimes only once they're in high school. And unfortunately, at that period of time, they've gone through puberty, and so their bodies have changed quite a bit. For Activate Her, and what we do is we want to create and normalize sporting opportunities for girls from their point of entry into school before they go through this journey, so that they can recognize what they enjoy, how they feel strong. And for us, sports sampling is really the way for the girls to explore for themselves, what am I good at? What am I confident in doing? How do I enjoy moving my body? And unfortunately, oftentimes, there's only very particular programs available for girls. So maybe it's only soccer, maybe it's only netball, maybe it's only boxing. And it's incredible that those spaces exist, but oftentimes we see less retention in programs because girls don't have the confidence to show up again and again. They kick a ball, they make a mistake, they're embarrassed in front of their peers, and then they don't come to practice the next day. And so for us, it's really about exposing girls to the vast variety of what different sports are out there that are both traditional female sports, but also non-traditional sports, to help them really create an active lifestyle and a love for movement and an understanding of their bodies. Because raise your hand again. Do you exercise or move your body as an adult? Day to day, week to week? Okay, the hands went down a little bit, so hopefully we start getting ourselves outside and get moving. But for me and for what we see at Activate Her, it's really a lifestyle that we're working to build from girls' point of entry in school and beyond.
Thank you very much. I also participated in multi-sports, but I can't play any. But I participated. And then moving on to Nikki. Nikki, I'm just curious, what are some of the barriers that girl children, especially in marginalized communities, face, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, maybe a step back, especially at Waves for Change. So just to introduce our service, we're a community-based non-profit organization, and we use surfing or group-based sport activities to provide a mental health service to children who we know face chronic adversity. And in particular, girl children who are interested to come to our service face a lot of barriers, things like when they are menstruating, it's really difficult for them to go in the ocean. They just don't come, they don't beach up. If they do come, they sit on the beach and they don't really participate. For a lot of them, traditional hairstyles, African hairstyles, they get in trouble. It's a lot of money and effort that go into their hair, and if they go into the water, they get into trouble at home. So those are two of the ones that we know they face. We also know girl children are more likely to have home responsibilities, look after their siblings. We know that on Saturdays when we've got boys coming, girl children are at home helping with the chores. So those are some of the barriers over the years that repeatedly come up for girl children to come to our service.
Thank you very much. And moving on to Akona. Akona, I would think that the barriers are the same, especially as a female referee. What are the challenges that the referees, I would say in the whole of Africa, are facing, female referees?
Wow. Obviously, as match officials, especially female referees, the community still believe that we do not belong. And when you see a match official, a female match official in the field of play, it's because probably they just want to pass a policy, Dr. Ruth. You just want to pass a policy, but we are not qualified, and probably they are doing us favors, or we don't even know the laws, or probably we are emotional because we are on our periods. So these are the challenges that we face as women, that constantly, when I step in the field of play, I need to reintroduce myself. After 12 years of being a FIFA referee, but when I step in the field of play, I still have to reintroduce myself because they still believe I don't belong and I'm being done favors.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akon. You don't have to introduce yourself. And then just coming back to you, Natasha, I just wanted to find out, so when you have a menstruation program and you give the pads, do you also give education in terms of PMS? Because it took me so long to understand why I could be angry just like before we leave here, and then the next day you go on your periods and you're like, oh, I'm not an angry person, it was...
Yeah, so we do cover, and our program covers from grade 4 all the way to grade 7. So starting with the younger ones just so that they can understand and like this is going to happen. And then with the grade 6 and 7s, it's really answering the questions that now they're asking. So we've tried and tested a few ways of doing it. Sometimes it was information overload, and if they haven't experienced it, it kind of was just over their head. So we went back with, what is your questions about it? And we found different things with the younger girls. It was, how do I tell my father that I've got if my mom's not at home, how do I tell my dad that I've got it? Is he going to understand? Does he know what it is? You know, and then you got the older ones that I'm feeling this way, and like, can I get pregnant now? And can I do this? So there's those questions. So it comes about asking, just looking at what the need is as well. And then also different schools, different communities, and Gansbaai again, it's in a town that's still very much old school, segregated into black, colored, and white, and our sports field is in the middle, but our schools are still very much divided. And so also even just going in and speaking to the different races, the questions that come up is, you know, it's a lot different, and understanding, again, that emotions, understanding all of those things, and that's what's so nicely with the Waves for Change program as well. So we've done the training and we adapted to our program, but it's also that the breathing exercises and having that moment for them to understand what is going through their body as well. we have it coincide so that it's okay what you're feeling, and it takes 3 weeks and not just 1 week, because there's the week before, there's the when it happens and the week after, and when you're craving chocolates and when you're craving all of this, it's all normal and your appetite increases, so it's having those conversations. And like I said, it's repeating it as well. So we've had it in grade 4, you might not have listened to the first one. You're now listening a little bit more intently in grade 5 because a friend of yours has got it. Ooh, grade 6, now you've got more questions because I've actually gotten mine. And so, yeah, so it's just having those conversations at all the stages so that they constantly understand what it is that their body is going through and that it is all normal and, yeah, it's just the way of life, yeah.
Thank you very much. And like I said, I actually needed that conversation and education growing up. Now, Adele, just I'm curious, how do you keep now girls consistent in their participation in sports? Your body is changing. You probably now want to have a boyfriend as well, even though I don't want them to have boyfriends. But like you're growing, and then how do you stay consistent in this multi-sport setup?
I think what's really fun in Activate Her is that our girls don't know what's happening the next day. They don't know what games they're going to play. They don't know what sport they're going to play. And so there's always this excitement and this energy of like, what are we going to do today? Because maybe it's the sport that I love. Maybe it's not. And maybe my friend is going to shine today. But I think what Natasha's also saying about this replication and this consistency is so, so important for kids. Oftentimes, and especially girls, we want to be building their self-confidence. We want to be building their self-esteem. And so I think what helps our girls continue to show up day in and day out is the fact that, yes, they might not know the game they're going to play, but they understand the flow of how the class is going to run. They understand that there's going to be different opportunities for them as individuals or as teammates to step up and to lead. We build into our curriculum a lot of different opportunities to bring different girls into positions of leadership throughout the class. But that sense of consistency coupled with that sense of constant change, I think is what creates a safe and supportive environment for the girls to learn, to grow, to thrive, but to practice a lot of these sporting skills in a safe and positive environment. Oftentimes, what they're learning in the classroom and the structures that they're learning within, it's just, I tell you this, you tell it back to me. And when we put them into real-world situations, when they have to practice problem solving or troubleshooting, they haven't had those lived experiences before. And so what we try to do, and I hope and I believe this is what really gets them excited, is that we're challenging them in different ways every single day, but in a space where they feel comfortable and okay with failing because they know next week we're going to do something different, and maybe I succeed next week, or maybe it's another person's turn to overcome challenges. And I think it's that sense of change, sense of supportiveness, but sense of consistency through access to positive female coaches that really lays the groundwork for these girls to continue on showing up and seeing themselves grow throughout the years they're in our programs.
Thank you very much. And just to include you, Nikki, but to build on to what Adele has said, I know that, like I said earlier, I struggled with athletics because I started being number 3 and I was used to winning. So what conversation do you have with a 16-year-old now who is doing really well and they now like, I don't want to be part of Waves for Change, for example, because I feel like I'm slacking, maybe because of the body changes or anything in life?
Yeah, so I think what's important in our service is that we want to create a space for individual growth for children, so not a non-competitive environment. So coaches are quite sensitive to children, supporting them if they've got a sense of achievement and they've got a sense of accomplishment, something they never thought they could do. So if there's a child that doesn't want to go into a girl child into the water, but next week we can convince her to go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And even if she just has a boogie board and she goes onto the waves, that gets celebrated and that gets help her to build her self-confidence. So it's definitely an environment where there's focus on children to accomplish and make progress as an individual and not in a competitive environment.
Thank you very much, because I think sometimes we forget that when children play sports, they're not really playing to win. They're just playing to have fun and, get introduced to the sports, and then we can start shouting at them when they're 25. Akona, I'm curious, how do you see the growth of female officiators in the next few years, especially here in Africa? You've been to CAF competitions, you've been to FIFA. What is the development there?
I think we need to give credit when it's due. We really we have improved a lot. And I like that even in South Africa, obviously, we have the Hollywood Bet. That league is being officiated by women only. And you go to your COSAFA, there are more competitions for women that are being officiated by women. And also at a CAF level, pretty much the same thing. FIFA level, pretty much the same thing. And I think the good thing is that now women are also being given opportunities to perform at men's competitions. And it's not about, we just want women. No. We have the requirements. You have to meet all those requirements. And if ever you meet those requirements, the opportunities are presented in front of you. So it's really up to you. Yes, we are not where we wanted to be, where we want to be, or we are not where we were yesterday, but there is a great improvement, and I think we need to celebrate it when we see a change. I mean, I've been to a lot of competitions. For me to be selected to go to my first Senior World Cup, I was selected to the COSAFA Men's COSAFA competition under 20, and then I was selected to the Men's under 20 AFCON in Mauritania. And the beginning of 2024, I was in Cote d'Ivoire for the senior now Men's AFCON as VAR, and the opportunities they are really giving us, and also when they see that you are performing and you are willing to push, opportunities will be given. When I just went to the Super Cup final in Saudi Arabia, when I saw my appointment, I was shocked to say, why am I being thrown in the deep end? How am I supposed to be a VAR and there's two teams? But then again, you need to remember that you have been fighting for this opportunity, and therefore when you are given the opportunity, you have to deliver. So, I mean, we are really going somewhere. You've seen the statistics of the AFCON, you've seen the numbers doubling, tripling in Australia and New Zealand, and I was very blessed and proud to be part of the history. So these are the things that we see. Even we see at the previous AFCON, how people were streaming the games, how people came to the stadiums supporting. And even when Banyana was playing in PE, the stadium was packed. What is this place? I forgot one of the locations that it took place. But we are going somewhere. We need to celebrate that. But we still have more to do.
Thank you very much, and you're doing a very good job. I remember during the FIFA World Cup, I think we had about 4 female referees, including you, from Africa going to the World Cup, which was very, very amazing to see. Talking about progress now, how do you track your progress for your program?
So we track it with, so at the schools, at the different locations that we have with our menstrual health, it's obviously just tracking like the consistent, how often they are accessing it. So we actually get calls from the schools to say we need a refill, so we know that it's being accessed and it's being used. We also just look at surveys with the young girls on what they knew before we had a talk with them, what do they know once we've left. So it's just like, was there any knowledge gained from the conversations? And then just also looking at the program itself and seeing the young girls now attending programs, attending schools, getting it from school, so they know it's there, so which means their participation has increased as well. So that for us is a big one, that now they're not skipping sports that week that they've got their periods, but they're getting involved because they have what they need to participate, and it's not about funds and I've only got one bag and so I have to make that stitch, but you know what, if I run out I can go access again. So it's just being able to monitor their participation, the usage, like I said, of school, how many packs of pads they going over a month or 2 months and how often we have to refill, and then it's the service before and after a talk with the different grades.
Thank you very much. And you're doing a very important work. I remember in varsity, we actually had a program where you can go get a pad when you go on your periods while at school. And it was very helpful because you don't have to panic. What if it happens today and I don't have it? So initiatives like that are very important. So Adele, how do we now as the community and work with Activator in making sure that we are creating positive change in girls participating in sports? How do schools, the whole community as a whole, what do we do?
Yeah, I think that this landscape is only possible if we work together. I think that the problem is just so huge because at the grassroots level, it's still lack of opportunities. It's lack of opportunities to access programming. And in 2025, we shouldn't be in a space where there is not a safe place for a little girl to go and to play and to participate on a team and wait for them to get to high school to be able to access a coach. And if they have access to a coach, there's still a very high likelihood that the coach is male. And so for us, what we see is, I think, that early intervention in this space is shifting the narrative of play because it's normalizing it not only for the girl, but also for the household. It's normalizing it for the school, that sporting opportunities should be a right and an expectation for little girls. And from that, I think what's really important is that we need to have structures in place for girls to access these female coaches that are coming from the spaces that they are living in. Oftentimes, they're having this support, but it's outside individuals that maybe don't speak their language, that maybe don't look like them. And for us, I will say, it has been a difficulty to find female coaches that have a sporting background in the spaces that we work. And we acknowledge that it's because programs like Activate Her did not exist 20 years ago. And so I'm really looking forward to the day that we have participants in our program that begin transitioning into being the young women who coach and really start breaking that cycle of poverty, breaking that narrative of girls don't play sports by changing the pathways and changing the role models. And I think the conversation has been had before, but it's also about how do we bring other people into this discussion? How do we bring dads into the discussion of saying, your daughter is not just going to play netball, she's also going to be involved in rugby, she's going to participate in boxing, and have them be at home and watch sports together as a family and not just say, this is what our sons do. And I think that, it's a lot of big things, but it's also a lot of small things, and it's a lot of the way that we speak about sports and sporting opportunities and ensuring that we're really inclusive and really welcoming to bringing girls and bringing women and bringing families to the table to just really welcome them into a space of loving and enjoying play and movement.
Thank you very much, and I think that is very important. I always say to people, the reason why I'm a journalist is because I used to watch football with my mom and my grandmother, and there was a time, do I mention the village again? There was a time where we didn't have electricity, so we used to go to Auntie Dolly's house, and my mom used to call Bafana squad. Auntie, the squad is playing today, so we need to go watch them. So that's how I ended up becoming a journalist. So what you're saying is very important. I wanted to ask, Doniki, is now at Waves for Change, are the programs gender specific? Do you say, I want to reach these girls, these much girls this year, and then boys and in this quarter of the year, or how do you work?
Yeah, we originally, I think around 2017-18, we had about 13% of our children were girl children. We now have about just under 3,000 children that come through the service annually, and of them, about 45% are girl children. And initially, the goal was just a 50-50 split to recruit the same amount of boys and girls. But then we started realizing girl children drop out of the service, girl children don't come as regularly. So the experience, despite the fact that having an equal split boys and girls, the experience wasn't as good as what boys had. So we did have to start thinking, how do we deliver surf therapy through a gender-sensitive lens? And it included training our coaches on role modeling, gender norms and stereotypes and behaviors that are supportive and that's not harmful, to make that space safe for girl children when they come. We've made sure that our coaches are 50% male and female, so that if a girl child does feel more comfortable to talk to a female coach, she's there. We make sure our female coaches can surf on the back line. Girl children are way more confident when they see, oh, it's a girl coach that's at the back and she's taking a wave. It's way more encouraging. So it's not only about having that balance between boys and girls, but it's making sure that the service definitely also meets the specific needs of girl children. Yeah.
Can I just have a follow-up question, please? How involved are the parents in these programs?
Initially it was difficult for a couple of reasons. The ocean, historically, we know a lot of the beaches, especially where we work, were not accessible to everyone. So it was a legacy that we had to help change, and that we're hoping that we're still ongoingly changing. And that is with actively being engaging with parents. We've got WhatsApp groups with parents to show them, send them pictures of their children at the ocean, to share with them some of the coping skills activities we do with their children. So parents can see the benefit of their children coming to the ocean. And then for girl children, it was even harder because surfing is traditionally a male-dominated sport, and it's risky, and it seems like it's made for boys. So we had to work with parents, with teachers, to say, come down to the beach, come see our female coaches, come see girl children in the ocean. So it's tricky, but I think we're getting there. I think we're making progress.
No, you're doing a very good job if you can convince parents of color who believe ancestors live.
And some of them, we've got parent days and we invite them, and some of them put on wetsuits and they go into the water. We've got such a bunch of energetic young coaches, similar to what you mentioned. It's coaches that come from the same communities, that face the same challenges. They know actually how to do that engagement. It's not our support staff, it's them. And if they're in the water, parents are right there with them.
No, that is amazing. My mom usually says when you get closer to the ocean, she asks if you're trying to tempt the ancestors. Now, Akona, coming to you, what is the one misconception we have about refereeing?
About referees or about refereeing?
Refereeing and referees.
I think the biggest misconception is that match officials, they are constantly being bribed. This is a fact. No, but let's talk about it. A match official can never make a mistake in the eyes of the spectators. And this is what gives the spectators, football people, to think that they have the right to insult us. They have the right to say, can you imagine the other day after the game, I got into my Facebook and then somebody says, one day you will be hit, or one day somebody will put a foot on your face. Yes, this is the South Africa we live in. And this is not a woman. This is a man who wrote that comment to say, you made such a mistake and therefore you need to be hit. One day, as long as you are in football, you need to know that you are going to be insulted just like men. The mere fact that you are in football, it means that you support Team A. You miss the penalty, it's because you have been bribed by Team 1, 2, 3. And this is the biggest misconception that you get about match officials. We don't make errors. We are not human beings, right? And I want you to sit back and think about this. Do I want to go to an F&B stadium full of people and then I miss a penalty? Today I walk in the stadium and say, hi everybody, I'm here to miss a penalty. This is what we need to think, right? This is what we get. It's even worse. Me being a woman, they will say I'm on my periods.
Yeah.
Imagine, these are our brothers, these are your husbands, these are your sons, these are our brothers. Imagine when I open my Facebook, or my mom or my brother or my sister or my niece is reading this thing that she missed that penalty because this thing is on her period. They don't even mention my name. This thing is on a period. This beast, whatever, she was on a period. How do you feel about that? Because she is very emotional. The reason she's emotional is because she's a woman. She doesn't have to be here. You understand this? And then there was there was even a time I felt like I need to lose weight because I am constantly being sexualized. All right? Yes, I want to lose my weight so that I look like this. If I look like this, maybe they will not say anything about me or my body or the fact that I am a woman in this field. You understand me? So these are the things that we get as match officials, that you can never make a mistake because Team B. And I would like you to say, why did you miss a penalty? Then I will tell you because I still need to watch the game. But if ever you are going to start questioning my integrity, then you are really insulting me. This is an insult to me because I have worked very hard to be where I am. I have to work twice as man. I have to wake up in the morning like Busaka said last week. To be at the World Cup, you need to know that normal does not exist. When they look at you, you must know that Akona wakes up at this, she does this, I analyze my games, I watch myself, and then I carry my name at the back. This is my father, this is my grandfather's name. Makalima, this is not my name. And then you insult my integrity and everything that I believe in, everything that I worked for. So these are the things that are very personal to us as match official. And also you have to deal with the fact that your brother is saying, I'm on your I was on my period. We should be educating our brothers. This is what we need to do. I'm sorry to take your topic, but it is very personal when you say, I miss this because I'm on my period. After you have a sister, you have a girlfriend, you have a daughter, you have been, basically, if ever a woman was not there, you are not going to be alive. But I cannot say those things. I cannot say those things on social media. It is platforms like these to say, I am a brother, I choose to understand periods. I am a brother, I will never say something like this. You understand?
Thank you very much, and
welcome.
I can relate to that. Like I said, when I say I'm a sports journalist, people ask me to name 500 players. Because how can you be a sports journalist as a woman? And when you make a mistake on TV, then it's because you probably slept with someone to be on TV, you know? So it's things that we still face as women. So I'm curious to know, as people, I'm going to pose the question to the three of you, as people who work in civil society. How are you making sure that we change the language around sports? Because I know that we tend to be very harsh. I even say to people most of the time when I'm doing a game, I remember during the Paralympics or the Olympics, I would say, please remember that athletes are people. Yes, we do want them to come back with medals, but at the end of the day, we're talking to human beings, because someone would miss a penalty and then there are comments coming from people saying all kinds of things. So how do we change the language?
As if we are on the grassroots level, and I think also what the kids are exposed to with social media and all of those things, and seeing the abuse that a referee might get after a match, and then seeing that sometimes plays out in a local game. So now you playing your 7-a-side game with your under 9s, and all of a sudden a ref makes some mistakes, and all of a sudden they now reacting the same way that they've seen their parents on the weekend shout at the TV to that ref, and you're going, whoa. So it's again just having those conversations with the young players and understanding that this is what we're doing. The game is for growth personally, mentally, physically, all of those things, but we're here to have fun, we're here to enjoy the game, and without those referees, it's the respect as well that we're giving to the referees, respect to the coaches, respect to the management of the game, but also without all of those, you won't be able to play. You know what I'm saying? So if you want to continue and love the game, you need to appreciate the people that are controlling the game, controlling the rules, understanding and then understand that they are making it safer for everyone. So yes, as Akona said, you miss something and it's by accident, but we all miss something at one point, and understanding that even though they are in that role as a referee, there is room for error, but then also taking that back to when you make a mistake, how do we overcome that? How do you deal with making a mistake? If you miss the goal and your team is now going, why? How do you feel in that moment? And do we then blame you? If the goalkeeper misses the goal and he's now let 3 balls in and the team loses, do we all blame the goalkeeper? But there's a back line as well, there's your defender. So we're all in it together, and we've got to have that talk again with everybody, that everyone plays a vital role within the game of sport, and then again, how does that vital role on the field adapt to back at home? Because at the home, you play that vital role as well. Your mom might make a mistake, Gogo might forget to pick you up and a little bit later from school, but we don't then penalize Gogo, but we try and understand why Gogo might have been late, or why my dad missed this, or why. So it's all about coming from a level of understanding as well, so that we understand that we are all human and we all make mistakes, but also how do we navigate the conversations around understanding and asking the right questions about why, and not just putting blame into what has happened. Yeah. So.
Thank you very much. I think this has been a very interesting panel. Are there any questions from the floor? Okay. What is that thing?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Amazing work that all of you are doing. My question is, on a personal level, you find yourself in these spaces, and as a woman in leadership myself, I'm often challenged with, the busyness, and we've got all of these things that we have to carry. So maybe just some insight into your world as to how do you cope with mental well-being? How do you cope? What are your daily, whether it's rituals or, what are the things that you put in place to stay sane in this environment that there's no blueprint for us as women in leadership. We are basically we are making it up, so to speak, as we go along, and you never know if you're making the right decisions. And these things, we are women and we feel everything. So what are the things that you put in place or that you are doing on a daily basis to stay sane in this space that we are navigating? Thank you.
Directed to me or all of us? All of, okay, good. Thank you so much for that question. I think it's very important, not only for us, but I think for the rest of the room. So on my side, what basically I do, Ellen, you just stopped my phone, my alarm. So Ellen just stopped my alarm. This is one thing I do. I'm sure when you get to my phone, it says drop everything and pray. So this is what I do. It's number one. I have times that I've set on my phone to say, drop everything and pray. 9 o'clock probably, it's my prayer of alignment and purpose, prayer of this. Also, when I feel like the world is closing and I am blocked, I always challenge myself to do something new. And when I feel like I cannot take it anymore, like let's for instance at work, or I eat football, I watch football, I'm cooking, football is watching, he's playing. Somebody's gonna send me a clip, I need to analyze. I watch something, I saw something, and I'm like, whoop, what is this? I record it, I send it, we start debating about it. The minute I feel like everything is on my mind, I switch off everything. I don't watch football, I don't talk football, I don't do anything related to football. I just told Adele, at the back, I can't remember if it was Adele, I told them that I have found a new coping mechanism. While I was preparing for the World Cup, I was scared that I will lose on this, I might have an injury, and then social media will be writing about me. And instead of me celebrating, I'm sitting on this corner being scared that I don't want to have injuries. What is the social media going to say about me if I fail? If I am this, okay, I need to lose a little bit of weight so that I am in good shape for the World Cup. And this thing was really sitting on my head. And instead of celebrating, I am just sitting in my corner and working on my mental health. I said, what I do, I switch off football. I started boxing. So boxing really challenged me because number one, I need to look at the bag. I need to know which one is a jab, which one is an uppercut or something like this. And I need to listen to this guy because this is something completely new. For the longest time, I've been using my legs. Now I need to coordinate both my mind. I need to listen I need to punch the bag, and also I need to know when to dab, when to hook, coordinating my legs as well. So this has really helped me to go out every time when I feel like I am not okay. Even now I was in Qatar, something disturbed me. I went to the gym and I saw a boxing bag. I looked for the gloves. Luckily I got the gloves. I punched the bag. And I know when I fight, I write down. If you have my diary, you will find today I am boxing fear. And then I will write it down. I will punch the bag until I am not scared of anything. And then I wake up the next day. Today I am fighting procrastination. And I will go there, punch it until I cannot fear anything, until I do not procrastinate. So for me, this is what is really helping me. Or go to the village. Do not underestimate the power of going home. Sometimes when I go home to the village, I then get to be connected with who I am and why I need to go back to the world and fight. So most of the times, I go home to the village and be a corner. Sit there, wake up in the morning, walk barefoot, and then I feel like, you know what? I'm ready to go to Joburg and fight. This is what I do.
I also box, so we might need to schedule a bout for charity, of course. But I just wanted to piggyback, I think, for a lot of us in the room that probably do fall back on quite similar coping mechanisms around movement and finding that whether it's going on a walk or a run or it's going to the gym, finding some form of exercise, maybe it's going surfing, to just claim that space for ourselves and to clear our head. And I think, to me, this is just what goes back to why sport for development is just so critical. If nothing else, it gives children a different outlet to be able to manage and process what they're going through. And if we're doing this as adults that are equipped with hopefully all of the resources and support in the world, and we're looking at sports as an outlet for us, hopefully it can be a tool and a resource for children as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was a very impactful panel. It was a very impactful question. Can I ask Prof that we do it after, because we are running out of time. Yes, but it was a very impactful session, and as someone, I also take advice from people who are younger than me, so I can also advise you on this. I go to therapy. The person that I was a year ago, it's March now, in March wouldn't have sat in front of people and started emceeing and doing things like that. I went to therapy because I realized that I needed, you know, the girl that you were when you were 5 that was confident? I needed that girl back. I went to therapy, 6 months of therapy. I started doing TV, I started doing radio, and now I'm emceeing events. So therapy is very important. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As someone with a diploma, I'm a bit intimidated by the next panel because it's a panel of academics. So I'm going to introduce our UJ panel who are coming onto stage. Some have PhDs, some are PhD candidates. And like I said, as someone with a diploma, I'm just like, OMG, how do I do in this situation? So they are going to moderate their own panel. So the first person that I'm going to call up is Professor Heather Morris Aiton. Am I pronouncing it right? Yes, from the University of Johannesburg. Prof. Heather is an associate professor in the Department of Sports and Movement Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Her research focuses on safeguarding, anti-doping, sports coaching, and women in sports. As an academic practitioner, she leverages research to enhance sports-related practices. And next on my panel is Buhle Bonke Tobeka Mdluli. Buhlebonke is a Master of Commerce student at the University of Johannesburg, focusing on safeguarding policy implementation in South African sports. As a safeguarding research intern for SASCOC, she develops solutions to enhance policy enforcement. A former radio anchor, news anchor, Buhlebonke's commitment to research and accuracy is rooted in her journalistic background and volunteer work at university events. Next on the panel is Naledi Dlamini. Naledi is an early career researcher specializing in safeguarding in sports, a former safeguarding intern at SAFSCOC. She contributed to policy developments and awareness initiatives to prevent abuse and discrimination. Naledi also facilitated safeguarding sessions for the National Olympic Committee of Kenya ahead of the Paris 2024 Olympics. And last but not least, we have Thembisile Mbatha. Thembisile Mbatha is an emerging researcher in sports management focused on reshaping mentorship in football. Her PhD research examines the role of mentorship in advancing female football coaches while identifying barriers to effective programs. With experience in coaching, sports administration, and events management, she combines academic expertise with practical insights to drive meaningful change. Passionate about gender equity, Thembisile is committed to transforming mentorship structures in football to create greater opportunities for women in the sports. Thank you very much, and I will leave you to it. It's on. And then, do you need a mic? Are you mic'd? Then you can just pass it on.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Heather Morris-Iton, and I have the greatest privilege ever to present my students' work this afternoon. And when we actually got this invitation from Prof. Cora, who is also at the University of Johannesburg, and we had a look at the program, and there was something on safeguarding and something else on mentorship, and then we thought, this might be a wonderful fit. Let's see how we can do it. And like all great ideas like that, when we started unpacking everything, it didn't quite look as easy as we thought it would be. But what we are trying to do is to examine how safeguarding and mentorship, looking at mentorship out of the box, so not traditional mentorship where there might be a formalized program, but how those two can be married so that we can ensure we have a safer space for our athletes, our coaches, our administrators to work in when we're looking at sport, because we all think that sport should be our safe space. It should be where athletes and coaches and everybody, team managers go, and they know that they are going to be safe, and they're not going to be abused, and they're not going to be put into situations that they can't necessarily cope with. So just to introduce our panel, on my left, I've got Tebeka. She's just completed her MCom in sport management, and she took one sports federation. So there's been a lot of talk around soccer today, and she specifically looked at safeguarding issues within soccer, within SAFA. So she'll give us some insights around her outcomes and her results. Then we've also got Naledi. And what Naledi did, she did a very interesting exercise where she benchmarked the SASCOC safeguarding policy against the IOC policy, the Commonwealth Games policy, and the 8 pillars, which are all out there. And then from having a look at how the SASCOC policy, safeguarding policy, was benchmarked against those international policies, she then went into 4 different federations and tried to look at what are the issues around implementing some of those safeguarding policies within those 4 different sports. And then Thembi is a PhD candidate, and what she's looking at is mentorship programs also specifically within football. But today she's taking a more generic stance around mentorship and how mentorship could possibly come and be placed within the safeguarding space. If I can get the pointer to work. Up. Oh, yeah, I've got it up, somewhere. It's not working. Ah, there we go. All right. So this whole presentation is looking at this conceptual model around barriers and supports for women in coaching. It was specifically done for women in coaching. And we've spoken a lot today. We've heard a lot around barriers, and there's a lot of barriers and not necessarily so many supports with regards to sport, women in coaching, women in sport, girls and the girl child in sport. So what we did was we took this model, which has 4 different levels. It looks at the interpersonal, individual, interpersonal, organizational, and social cultural level, and it looks at what are all of those barriers and what are the supports, and can we turn those barriers into supports, and then how do we do that? So that is the foundation for the presentation today, and as we move on, we will have each of Tebeka and Naledi, as well as Tembi, looking at this model within safeguarding and then within mentorship, and seeing what are those barriers that came out of the research that they've done, and what are the supports. And then at the very end, we are going to engage everybody sitting here, because we want to come up with an action plan. My mandate to SSCN was we will come up with an action plan that we will give to you, so that this time next year we can say how many of those points that we all decided on were we able to at least initiate. Because as we know, we sit here, we come up with these wonderful ideas, and we talk and we talk and we talk. But how many of us, our talk needs to become action? And the honourable ministers, I think both of them said that this morning as well. It's enough talking. Prof. Cora loves to say that as well. You know, we get to a point where talking is not enough anymore, and we have to implement action, and that's kind of what we want to try and do today. So without me going on any further, I'm going to introduce you to Tebeka and Naledi, who are going to unpack from a safeguarding perspective, because both of them did their research looking at safeguarding. They're going to unpack the different levels and come up with the barriers and the supports. Tebeka, you on.
Thank you very much, Prof. Greetings to the House at large. So I was conducting research on the implementation of safeguarding policies within South African football. Yeah, as Prof mentioned, there was a lot of talk in football, and I know it's such a male-dominated industry. But looking at a safeguarding perspective, so I found out that we have resource constraints, the lack of awareness of safeguarding policies, and the unfamiliar relationships with our sport governing bodies. So looking at the individual barrier, so we have personal values and beliefs as a key barrier within the implementation of our safeguarding policies. Now, what does that mean? So whenever we speak of personal values and beliefs, whenever you look at safeguarding, there are people who might actually think that discipline is abuse. And then another one might think abuse is discipline. So whenever we speak about safeguarding, we need to draw that line. What does the one mean, and what does the other actually mean? So simply because you think that I'm disciplining this person, that can't be abuse. You have to look at our safeguarding frameworks and see what does that actually distinguish. Then moving on to the next, we look at experiences. In an individual barrier, everybody has experiences. Everybody has something that they say, I don't want to do this again, simply because I experienced X, Y, and Z. In safeguarding spaces or in our sporting structures, there are people who have experienced abuse, and they might be very, very afraid of reporting something simply because of what they've experienced before. Now, do we have a mechanism as our sports structures to say, this is how we should actually deal with people that have experienced X, Y, and Z?
Good afternoon, everyone. So when we go into the interpersonal barriers, when you think of sport, you think of teams, you think of relationships between team members as well, and that is what the interpersonal barriers really emphasize. Firstly, from my research, a key finding was power imbalances. So we have the idea that we need to win at all costs, and then the barrier, the line is blurred between what exactly does that mean. At what point do all costs become abusive? And we find that there are power imbalances and that there are some people, maybe your coaches, administrators, who have the power to inflict damage onto athletes and people that they oversee. And those things as well, when you have to report, you find that there's social pressures. There are athletes who fear alienation, right, from the rest of the team for not, just sticking the status quo and really just towing the line, even though it's at their own detriment. You also find that the power imbalances also come into play with social pressures. There's a culture to respect your authorities by all costs, and even if those costs come at a burden. So that is part of the research findings I found in the interpersonal barriers. Tobeka will continue with the organizational level.
Yes, my favorite, lack of resources. So I remember when we were having a conversation with Naledi, we said, when do we actually ever have resources in general, like in South Africa? When do we actually say, oh, we actually do have a resource separated simply to deal with that? So whenever we talk about the lack of resources at an organizational level, we talk about funds specifically made to ensure that safeguarding policy implementation is effective within our sports structures. Then we talk about how organizations in general would not necessarily save up money to make sure that safeguarding is prioritized within that organization. I understand we do have resource constraints outside the organization, but in organizations specifically, they sometimes focus on other departments rather than safeguarding. You have high performance, the delivery of, let me just say, Team South Africa, or the delivery of Bafana Bafana, for instance. But none of that is actually saved to say, let's specifically have this resource to deal with safeguarding policy implementation.
And then you also see lack of integration across stakeholders. So basically what that means, and I think a few of the panelists touched on it today, is when there are entities that should be working together which tend to work in silos. If you want to achieve a safeguarding program in a school, it's important to reach out to the Department of Basic Education, for instance. And what we find in the sports sector, within the research, is that the safeguarding officers within the different federations are aware of one another, but there are barriers to actually reaching out to one another and forming a network to strengthen the safeguarding approach overall in the country. You find that the national federations aren't exactly sure who to get in touch with in the the international federations at SASCOC, etc. So there are entities who all know that they are supposed to be championing safeguarding, but they don't work together to ensure that there's a seamless integration of safeguarding throughout sports as a whole.
So moving on to the socio-cultural layer, so we have cultural norms. Cultural norms are basically what as a culture we say regarding sport. So usually we have this culture again of perpetuating systematic inequalities. So we do sometimes have a way that we treat women and a way that we treat men. We have a way of dealing with safeguarding incidences and a way of dealing with certain things. So sport organizations may perpetuate a system of inequalities such as racism, again, sexism, where things are just not treated equally. And we do need like a system where we actually raise awareness that we need to deal with this as a culture.
Sure. Power dynamics. Oh, sorry. Power dynamics. The interesting thing about this figure is that the barriers are dotted lines because they're permeable. And power dynamics is something that was also reflected in the power imbalances, right? So when we speak of power dynamics, we talk of how in some federations are stronger than others, due to maybe historical reasons. They've just had a longer time to establish themselves, so they have more funding. Others are weaker. So at SSCN, they like to say that there are federations that work from the boot of their cars. They just don't have the resources to actualize the big policy that SSCN would have. So you find that there are dynamics at play that at the end of the day really impact the ability for safeguarding to be implemented within their federation. There's also a lack of public awareness. We champion safeguarding in the spaces that we're in, but I remember the IOC had created a study at one of their youth Olympics where they asked point blank the athletes, do you know what safeguarding is? What do you think it is? What is safe sport? And most of the time, the athletes associated safeguarding and safe sport with either mental health or something to do with medical reasons. So it's a matter of ensuring that the public at large is aware of what it is that safeguarding is meant to do. It is meant to protect the athletes. It is also meant to bring about awareness of their rights, what they are entitled to accept and what they're entitled to not. And just ensuring that we are all of one sound, one voice, so that moving forward, it's no longer a matter of making sure people know. It's more so making sure that people are, yes, armed with information, but know what to do with that information moving forward.
So I think the common theme that comes across, and we've put it there on the left-hand side, is that fear of retaliation. So at all of those different levels, by speaking out, and we always say, women, where are your voices? Victims, where are your voices? Sometimes those voices have to become so stifled because of that fear of retaliation. And that is probably one of the biggest challenges that we face within the safeguarding space. So now we're going to have a look at the barriers, and we'll follow the same format. The support, sorry.
Okay, so we need safeguarding awareness training. So we need a trauma-informed care. So what we basically need is, this is a support because it's necessary within sporting environments. We need mental and well-being resources available for our sports systems to support our athletes. So whenever you have a past experience of being violated, let's say by a coach, or being violated in any shape or form, whether that is a past experience or whether that is a present experience, we need experts within this. We need people that will volunteer and actually say, hey, can we actually deal with this at a sporting level? We need like a steering group where we bring everybody together to deal with this. So I need to keep it short so I can go on and on and on and on.
I think another thing in the individual layer would be reporting structures. Like Prof said, there's fear of retaliation. So in ensuring that the reporting structure is strong from the ground up ensures that at every level you get the opportunity to intervene before something happens to an athlete, from their grassroots and then they make it into more formalized structures of sport until they're elite athletes. And oftentimes the only time an athlete comes out and says anything is when they've gotten to an elite level because they're finally reaching a safeguarding officer or safeguarding structures. So ensuring that there are structures from the grassroots up until the elite level ensures that at every level there is someone out there to help. And then at the interpersonal level, a support would be a positive community and in sport relationships. I mean, some of the panelists spoke about how if it weren't for their families and the communities that they come from, they wouldn't be where they are today. And it is ensuring that in safe sport, we also create that as well. It's in creating programs, it is in creating mentorship programs like my colleague will speak about, and just creating a relationship where sports is a vehicle to achieve more, but at the end of the day, sports cares about who you are first and foremost.
Okay. So for the lack of resources, one of our speakers actually spoke about the cohesiveness of the sporting fraternity to actually come together and bring upon resources to facilitate safeguarding. But this has obviously came across with a lot of challenges within our sporting sector because there's just, as I mentioned before, there's just no designation to say this is the amount we have for safeguarding policies. But I think as a collaborative approach, we can actually get funding from our private sector and from our government and for everybody that would like to see this being effective and just collaborate together and just make sport a safe sporting environment.
Prof. Cora had actually mentioned something about a safeguarding hub. When I heard it, I likened it to the support here, which is a national independent body. To have a body that specifically deals with safe sports and is an integrity body, for lack of a better term, would ensure that athletes know that there's a place that is independent of their federations and their sporting structures that is solely there to support them. I think we can even extend it to so far as to create a network for people who work in safe sports, to give them a community of people to reach out to, who deal with the things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, who understand maybe the constraints of having to keep, certain things confidential and having to work through the legislative systems in the country, and just have resources in personnel of people who have been through what they've been through. Mentorship programs as well, if you in an organization, you know that there's a succession plan, that safeguarding doesn't just stay with who you are. Had it not been for, Prof and the people that I've met throughout the sports industry, I would not have been able to access as many opportunities with exploring what safeguarding is. So it's about ensuring that you're able to pass the baton on to someone else and ensuring that structures to do that are available in the system.
I think moving on to the socio-cultural, remember I mentioned cultural norms. Cultural norms are what exists within our society to actually say, women can't do this, or men can actually do this. Women, you're not supposed to feel like this. This is sport at the end of the day. Why are you upset in the first place? That's supposed to be harsh anyway, or else you feel insulted. So safeguarding initiatives are actually required. We need to teach people out there. We need to teach our parents. We need to teach our neighbors. We need to teach our communities to say, you speaking to me like this is not okay. You doing this to me is not okay. You need to know your rights at the end of the day as a human being.
And whistleblower protection, we need systems in place that ensure that once you have said something, you are protected during that process and after as well. It's part of the retaliation, the fear of retaliation that Prof had spoken about, that in the event that you do say something, in the event that you do report, will you be taken care of in the process and afterwards? So whistleblower protection ensures that those systems are there, and in eventuality, it strengthens the integrity of the system as a whole.
Remember when I spoke about how men are supposed to feel like this, or women are supposed to feel like this? So as a society in general, we lack public awareness also of our safeguarding policies within our football structures, or within our sports structures in general. Let me not be specific to football, sorry. So what this means, we need to actually campaign for safeguarding policies. We need to let people know what safeguarding policy implementation is. We need to actually tell people, even us, it's also our responsibility as people, also as people part of research, as people in sports structures, we need to let people know that, hey, there is something that you can do should you encounter this within your sporting fraternity, within your sporting body, within your sporting federation. You can go this route if this is what you want. If you can do this and this and this and this, but we can't necessarily do that in silos, as my colleague mentioned. We can't do this in as an individual. We need like a collective collaboration to do this and make this effective as possible for our athletes.
So I think at the end of the day, what is seen as a big support is being able to try and find collaborative networks that can assist at every single one of those levels to turn that retaliation into collaboration, to turn all of those reds into the greens. And I apologize profusely if there are any people in the audience that whose vision does not allow you to see the differences between red and green. We use this the robot colors, so the reds are on your right and the greens are on your left, other way around. Right, okay, right, left, okay. So it was just as that, you know, red we always associate with danger, green is kind of a safe space for us to try and work with. And the thing that came across out of all of their, both sets of research was that we have implementation that is seen as a barrier and it is also a support. But how it gets implemented and where it gets implemented will ultimately determine how much of a support it is or how much of an actual barrier it is. Okay, so we're going to move on. Let's see if we can get this video to play. Yeah.
This is Friday night football in Spain. Fans are here in their thousands to see the stars of Spanish football, their World Cup winning women's team.
Well, we're watching the biggest names in Spanish female football tonight. We've got Alexia Putellas on the ground. We've got Jenny Amoso over here. I must admit, it's pretty thrilling being this close to the game.
Cuando vamos por el país, pues es algo muy bonito, cómo te reciben, cómo nos animan, cómo se vuelca la ciudad a la que vamos.
Spain's moment of glory came at one of the biggest events in sporting history. In Sydney, in front of a global TV audience of more than 200 million people, Spain took out the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup.
Tell me the feeling of winning the World Cup.
Es difícil de describir
what we did in the World Cup. How I say, I think that I haven't realized yet that I'm a World Cup winner.
But then came this. What did you think of Luis Rubiales kissing Jenny Amoso on the lips at the Women's World Cup?
Y evidentemente cuando vi el beso mi primera reacción fue de impacto, me cayó el teléfono al suelo literal.
Y ya está, evidentemente si hubiera tenido que escribir el guión hubiera sido diferente, pero no dependía de mí.
And to be honest, I just saw like, okay, our president in that moment did something like this in front of everyone. And in a moment that it was supposed to be our moment as a team and not his moment.
When the head of Spanish football, Luis Rubiales, kissed star striker Jenny Amoso, it unleashed outrage in Spain. And with it erupted a mountain of tension that had been tearing this sport apart behind closed doors for decades.
It was a culture fear. We have so many experience like that, where players that try to speak up, suddenly they never come back to the national team.
Do you think that the kiss had to happen in order to draw back the curtain for the world to see?
Lamentablemente sí. Lamentablemente sí.
Luis Rubiales has been on trial here at Madrid's National Court, charged with sexual assault as well as conspiring to coerce a witness. Former coach Jorge Vilda is also facing the music, charged with coercion. They're now awaiting a verdict. This story has captivated the world. More than 100 journalists have come to the capital to cover it. For Spain, this is a day of reckoning. It's their Me Too moment, a case of foul play that many claim has been happening for years.
If any of you haven't seen this documentary, it's on Netflix. I urge you to try and see it. It is a very eye-opening documentary about what actually happened with the Spanish women's football team. Debbie?
Thank you, Prof. Firstly, surely you're wondering why is the background for Mentorship blue? Now, Prof already now exposed
I
it, but it's
spoiled
okay.
it. I'm so sorry.
So blue is associated with trust. So remember, if trust is not built, then the relationship most probably will collapse. So, Prof, can you please? Right, so I'll just get straight into it. So the first level, which is the individual level, it speaks about the fear of speaking out. So we all know that female coaches and players, not all of them, but some, do fear that if they don't speak out about the mistreatment or the discrimination or unfair treatment within the organization, one of many things might happen. It's either they'll lose their spot in the team or they'll be labeled as troublemakers. And the next one. However, we know that limited knowledge of their rights and the proper channel to actually report the mistreatment sometimes is an issue. This is why we need a safeguarding confidant. And I'd like to make an example using, what's his name again? Is it Faisal? Faisal, for me, from the conversation that I've gathered, is that he was a confidant for Logan, which is very important at an individual level. Next. Right, so at the interpersonal level, the lack of a trusted confidant. Not everyone is a trusted confidant. Yes, you can be a confidant, but a lack of a trusted confidant. We know that in sports organizations or in football clubs or any sporting club, it is easier for some of the people to vent out or confide in others. But having that trusted person who will listen to you and ensure that your issue is being treated with confidentiality, confidentiality, it's rare. Right. We all know, yeah, also with our young players, they fear the peer backlash, meaning that it's important again to have a safe person or that person who you will go to and say, this is what I'm going through, and you're reporting it to that person. Right, so the organizational level, ooh, I feel like this part had to pop up because I think this is the most discussed level, right? So we know that the resistance to change, especially in organization, is a big issue. We know, especially with football as a male-dominated sport, they do not give females opportunities to thrive. Oh, I wanted to speak to that lady, the CEO, Dumi, yes. She spoke about thriving. So this is one of the things that in the organizational level that female coaches or players are not exposed to. Safeguarding policies, this is where female coaches and players don't get the opportunities or don't have the proper channels also to report on the mistreatment. Okay, Prof. Campus. Right, so from if you listened properly, the individual and the interpersonal level, this is where the confidant comes in. But at some point, the confidant needs to either be a mentor at some point or refer the female coach or the player to a certain mentor, a reliable mentor. So the social-cultural level, this is where sexism and gender biases come into play. So we all know again that female coaches in that space, I think also Akona mentioned that this is where they always say female coaches are not good enough to be in this space. Female coaches are not groomed, they shouldn't be in this space, they belong in the kitchen and all of that. But this social-cultural level, we can break through it and actually implement a mentorship program where female coaches and players can actually break through the concrete ceiling.
So I think if I just want to quickly go back to the previous slide. Within the safeguarding space, so most of the federations, if they are in compliance with the SASCOC regulations, have to have a designated safety officer or somebody that is in charge that will take on the safeguarding duties within the federation, within a club, at a provincial level. So along all of the levels, there has to be somebody there. So when we were looking at this model, we were thinking, okay, if I am the designated safety officer for my province, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that every club and every athlete in my province knows who I am. And because this whole system is built on that trust takes a long period of time to develop. I don't just trust you just because I see you've got a nice jacket on or whatever. So it takes a period of time to develop. So the difference between that safeguarding confidant being a person that has been identified within the club, within the province, that everybody knows. So it could be somebody that's always at the games, they're giving the oranges or the drinks or whatever. Every single person knows who that person is. And the players can feel, yes, I can go to Nosi and say, Nosi, listen, this is happening to me. Please don't say anything. And because now the confidant, we would want to have had some kind of counseling, have gone through some kind of safeguarding courses, but she then knows that this person is entrusting her with something that has happened to the athlete at a particular level. Doesn't matter what it is. Then Nosi knows that, okay, what do I do with this information? And we go through the checklist of, how, is it something that I need to report? Do I have to tell your parents, etc., etc.? So she's been trained in all of those. But then Nosi also knows that if it is something that needs to be escalated to a safeguarding officer, then she is the person that can do that, because that athlete might not know who the safeguarding officer is, or what has come out in some of the research is sometimes that safeguarding officer is actually the perpetrator. So now what? So we're trying to have a look at how can we identify those trusted people that are close to the athletes, that are close to the coaches, that they can then turn to when they have issues around safeguarding, and then that person becomes a conduit to escalate it further to a safeguarding officer, and then through the various judicial processes if that's how it needs to pan out. So when we have a look at how safeguarding is structured in terms of policies and also in terms of implementation, then these are the things, these are the barriers that we actually need to address, and they need to be addressed urgently, because while we are sitting here, we have athletes that are being groomed. While we are sitting here, we have athletes that are being abused by their coaches. While we are sitting here, we have female coaches that are being abused by maybe their athletes or by their peers or whoever it is. And so if we don't have these kinds of supports, if we just have all of these barriers, then those supports in green don't mean anything. And so this is why we really want to attack it at every single level, from the individual. How do I feel? From the interpersonal, who are those people that are closest to me? From the organization that I'm in, whether I'm sitting at a grassroots level club or whether I'm sitting at a provincial or even a national federation. And then addressing those social, cultural issues becomes something that as a society, this is what we need to do. So yes, we've got great policies, we've got great GBV awareness and all of that kind of thing. But what are we actually doing to bring those numbers down, to ensure that we have safe spaces for our athletes and our coaches to operate? And so again, it just goes back to the implementation. Again, implementation can either be a barrier or it can be a support, depending on which level it is operating from and who is doing the implementing of that. And when we, again, going back into the safeguarding space as it is right now, with the policies and the policy development, yes, SASCOC has got a policy. It's robust. We've had a look at it. It's gone into the federations. Some of the federations have amazing safeguarding policies, but they may not then have the resources to implement those policies effectively. So that's why we're still having athletes and coaches and people within sports still being abused. And so until we have this call for action, which is my next slide, we are still going to be talking about this. And like Prof. Cora said earlier today, when she was talking about policy development, she's been talking about gender policy development since 20, 30 years ago, and we're still having the same conversations. I don't believe that we need to be having the same conversation next year. Please, can we do something? That's all I'm asking, because it's critical. We cannot be having what happened to the Spanish football team, where we had 42 million people watching that and saying, oh, I think it was okay. You know, the president, he was the president. And they all got excited. And when you watch that movie, the girls go through that emotion of, well, maybe that was okay. And then when they reflect back on it, it's like, no, it actually wasn't. And that's then when they decided to take that stand. So we have to go through these emotions of finding where is it that we are eventually going to say, this is enough now. Time for action. And so as we move on now, well, there goes my action plan. I want to find out from the audience if there is one or two things that you, either as a person or as a federation or as an NGO, wherever you are, what is it that you want to be done now with regards to safeguarding? Yeah. Ellen, you need to write all of these down because it's going back to you.
Hi, everyone. So, yes, fortunately, my federation has a very robust, safeguarding policy, and we're implementing it in stages. Great. The only thing is, as much as players and coaches, female coaches, are in trouble, we tend to neglect team managers and administrators in all of this.
Yeah.
So I need safeguarding policies to also protect the protectors. As much as there's whistleblower protection, at the end of the day, female team managers will sometimes be the only female in certain spaces. And certain things that are said, you end up being told, go get the coffee, go write down, take down the minutes. Meanwhile, there's someone way junior than you in that situation. And the verbiage used, I use very nice language right now. But when you're in those spaces, the words used are not so conducive.
Yeah.
And if the confidant and the protector doesn't feel protected, do you think it's going to now, she's going to turn around and want to protect those coming up? She's going to be like, it's all about me.
Yeah.
So we need to also protect the protectors so that they feel strong enough that when a lady comes and says, to me, coach did X, Y, and Z, or whoever in the team did X, Y, and Z, I will feel strong enough knowing that the systems in place and the steps put in place will protect me as well while I'm taking this child with me and protecting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you bring up a very good point, because when we talk about safeguarding, we always immediately think about the athletes. Oh, and then maybe it's the coaches, but the team managers. So that whole athlete support system need to be included in that. And then the other thing that I just want to mention is that also when we talk about safeguarding, we always, most of the time, we are thinking about children playing sport. So very often we don't think about the young adult or the older adult, okay, or your masters, or at the Gogo Olympics. I love that, okay. We need to have safeguarding there as well, and it might not be, it might just be a safety thing, you know, that they don't fall and break a leg or whatever the case is. But so it's across the lifespan of somebody that is participating in sport at whatever level that might be. And I think that's the other misconception around safeguarding, is that it's only we're safeguarding children. No, we're not. We're safeguarding everybody. We want to create a safe space for everybody that is participating.
Thank you, Prof. Maybe the question also is that I don't think you can look at safeguarding in isolation, right? It's broad, and I mean, before a child is an athlete or in sport, they at home, it's what they communicated at home, whether you're the perpetrator or the victim. We also know that certain communities where you come from, poverty puts you more at risk to become a victim, you know. But so, you know, just to look at the entire system around it, you know. Also, when you think about sport and when you think about the athlete, you know, and the thing that's built around, if you think about the popular youth culture and how we also portray women as well, you know, all these things contribute, you know. So I always like to see it in two areas: putting out fires, but also, and we need the two-prong approach, putting out fires and dealing with these issues by policies. But I think the most valuable thing that we can do is around education, value-based education, life skills, and making the boys and girls both part of it, you know, because naturally I think, you know, boys have certain things in their bodies and women have certain things, that, you know, that when they grow, and it's about exploring. But how do we ensure that although we have these feelings and emotions, you're not a loose cannon. You can't just go and violate. There's certain things, you know, that we need. So I want to just say, you know, in terms of that, you know, what certain things can we look at in terms of life skills and education and so forth?
So, and the other thing, Alan, is we also need to remember that it's not only girls that are being abused in sport. All right, it's the majority in terms of the cases that get reported, but it's not just the girls. So it's also, we spoke about the male child this morning as well. So I think in terms of the education, you know, I know certainly in our federation we have quite a big drive to educate coaches and team managers around safeguarding issues and what it is that you have to do and how you can do that. And I think those kinds of programs need to be also focused at the athletes. So when we talk about safeguarding, I mean, how many safeguarding workshops have we done for athletes? Do they understand what safeguarding is? This is like a word that gets thrown around the federation. Oh, this is your designated safeguarding officer. Okay, well, and what do they do? How are they going to help me? So I think it's about creating specific educational awareness, public awareness programs that deal with specific issues around safeguarding and creating that awareness across, again, all levels of participation. The athletes need to be involved. They need to have their voices heard. And if they don't know what the job is of the safeguarding officer, then why are we putting those safeguarding officers in place? Do the athletes know that I've got to come and see Alan if my coach was screaming and shouting at me? Yeah, I know Alan, and he's a safeguarding officer, but what must I do? My coach always shouts at me. So I think those are the kinds of things that we really need to be intentional about. When when we say we've got all of these barriers, how do we move them into supports? And the supports mean that we have to action it. So when we talk about public awareness, when we talk about education, when we talk about having a confidant and their training, when we talk about mentorship and putting those programs in place, how do we action that so that we can start to move those reds into greens? And I think that is the crux of the matter, because then we speak about resources and the availability of personnel, of funding, specific funding, looking at safeguarding. It's not there. So there's nothing that's ring-fenced for this issue that has become a national crisis, because we read about all of our athletes and coaches and incidences on an international stage where this is not right. And what are we going to be doing about it? There's a question.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks to the panel. That's a really good session, and you've picked up on some really good points, strong points there. I like the fact you used the term implementation, because every sport in South Africa now has a safeguarding policy, and they now have a designated safeguarding officer, and yet they're still not getting it right. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example of how they're not getting it right. So, 2 days ago, a national sports federation in South Africa announced that they were suspending an administrator and coach, same person, subject to holding a disciplinary inquiry into a serious sexual offence that was committed by this person. This person committed the offence in 2018. They have a high profile. It was known to the sport that this was the case. In 2020, the person admitted guilt and was convicted to a 5-year suspended sentence. The sport must have known about that, because this person has a high profile. It has taken almost 7 years since the incident for the sport to suspend that person. Now you have to ask yourself, they've got a policy. Their international federation has a policy. They have a policy. SASCOC has a policy. So why wasn't that policy being implemented? And the reason is, we're at this stage where we've got the mechanisms in place, but we don't have a culture in place of safeguarding. People are not living safeguarding. And that's what we need to do. That's why I like the idea of implementation, because we're not implementing the policies that we've developed. We need to move on. It's everybody in sport's responsibility to safeguard children and vulnerable adults. It's all of our responsibility to do that. And we need to start building safeguarding frameworks and systems that implement the policies that we've got. So thank you very much for the idea of implementing.
I just want to latch on to what the gentleman says. Sorry. I'm Salama Davis from the Footballers Lab. It comes from the top down. We have our Department of Sport and Culture. It comes from the top down. But in the same breath, us at the bottom need to put the pressure up, because that is the only way we're going to get that implementation from happening. Thank you.
I do think, one of my research findings was that what seemed to be lacking was a clear accountability measure. So if this happens, whose responsibility is it really to make sure that something happens, something is done with the case? If something happens with Team South Africa, it is then known that it is the responsibility of the safeguarding officer for SASCOC to ensure that that case is seen through to finish. But if something happens and it is a collaborative championship, whose responsibility is it to, one, get the report, make sure the report is seen through to finish? So I think another part that needs to be implemented when we're talking about safeguarding frameworks is also pinpointing who exactly must be accountable when these cases take too long or when these cases do fall through the cracks.
Sorry, just to say something to what Naledi has just said. Remember I mentioned something about the lack of collaboration within our sporting structures. We have DSAC, we have SASCOC, we have school sport. All of those things have their own different processes. All those things have their own way of doing things. Now, sometimes when something would get to the other body, they would tell you that, no, you haven't extended all the internal processes. Now, it can't come to us because you haven't finished all your business as this organization. Now, you have to ensure that, wait, before I escalate it to that point, it has to get to that point. Now, it gets very, very exhausting because you might find that the victim has to go through certain channels and these channels and these channels and these channels. So we also have to look into working together as sport organizations. Thank you.
Hi, I'm from Life Saving South Africa. We have implemented our policies. And a couple of people who have spoken have mentioned a couple of things I wanted to say. Safeguarding is not about sport. It's about everything, everywhere, every day. We can have policies, which we do, and they're great, but they're up there. Okay, we're down here. What we need to look at doing is normalizing the discussions about abuse. We all moan and groan about petrol price going up. We put on social media that we're upset about the price of milk going up. But yet nobody says they're upset about abuse they saw or suspected. We need to normalize speaking about abuse, just like we normalize anything else that makes us upset in life. When we have that on the ground, we're going to improve. And then people are going to turn around and say, oh, well, where's the policy? Let's look at it. But until then, people don't know. And unfortunately, we're all a bunch of ostriches. We put our heads in the sand. It doesn't affect us directly. We don't do anything about it. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. It was really great.
Thank you and congratulations. Coming through for you, Jay. I'm so proud of you, but that's not my question. Okay, the question is, I went to SASCOC. I just want to share something. When protocols are in place, I interviewed Leon Fletcher. Okay, so he's in a wheelchair. We all know that. I was interviewing him and they were building and it was such a noise. So I said, Leon, I can't hear you. Can I close the doors? And before, you know me, I don't listen so carefully. So I went on to close the door. He said, no, Cora, open the door. It's protocol for safeguarding. I said, Leon, you're in a wheelchair. He said, yes, but you can attack me. I said, okay, so let's open the door. So when protocols are in place, it's about the organizational culture that we have. And when I look at your model, I think it's great, but I also think we need to filter the layers linked to the concept. So if we look at culture, it's also the organizational culture, because a lot of abuse is agreed upon. People behave because it's the role that we need to fulfill. So, and we need to break that down. So I would also think about norms and culture at all levels. And as Alan said, okay, it's also about the socialization, what happens at home. The one thing is also understanding abuse. I was doing research in the Cape Flats and I was talking about abuse, and the one girl said to me, "What do you mean by abuse?" I said, "Okay," so I gave an example. She said, "That's not abuse. When I swam in the dam and my father warned me, he threw me, I quote, he threw me up in the air and I fell myself asleep. I thought, I'm going to die. This is too much." She said, "No, but I was guilty. And this morning, my mother just gave me a look. That was abuse. I was not guilty." So in the essence of the conceptualization of the phenomenon of abuse is also misunderstanding. And that for me is at the core. What is acceptable was not acceptable. So it's also understanding it from various perspectives.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Precious Masaka. I'm from Zimbabwe. Since morning, I've been learning a lot about South Africa, and I've really benefited a lot. I would like to thank the team from UJ. As I would say, as academics, there's so much that we can contribute to the country in terms of informed decisions, things that we get from surveys. And as a mother, I wish one day there could be a register of offenders for people who would misdo things, people who abuse children in sport. You find that if someone is suspended in athletics or soccer, or they just move to another sport court, no one really knows what's happening. So it becomes a trend or a pattern. They are suspended here, they move to tennis, they abuse children there. They are suspended from tennis, they move to another sporting court. I wish there was a register. Thank you.
Hi guys, sorry.
Sorry, just to respond to that. As part of my internship at SASCOC, one of the things that I suggested was that we create a sexual offenders register where we actually write the names of all the people that have offended in a certain federation so that they don't jump from one federation to another. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Sorry, Dudu. The issue with that is that your name has to be on that register, and you have to have been convicted in order for your name to be on that register. So you could go around grooming, and the federation says, "No, we can't do this." They might have an internal disciplinary or something, and it's fine. Okay, fine, I'll move to somewhere else. So the judicial system doesn't work in the favor of of sport and for coaching, because if you just under that border of being convicted, you can still carry on and carry on and carry on. And as we know, the judicial system takes forever for there to be some kind of verdict in place. And in the meantime, that person can still continue with their job, because then if you fire them and there's still that investigation going on, they're going to take you to the CCMA, because then that is their livelihood that you are taking away, and they haven't been found guilty yet. So there's a lot of loopholes within the judiciary that don't work in our favor in terms of keeping our sport safe. And so when we talk about the integrity unit, the new safeguarding unit, and we talk about collaboration between safeguarding, policy implementation, and then also, law enforcement and all the other sectors that need to work together, that's what we really need, is that collaboration on a macro scale as well. So, sorry, one more question.
So another thing, sorry, I know I'm hogging the mic at this point. So another thing I just realized is that, we don't make safeguarding part of our compliance. Like when you're a coach, you need a level 1, a level 2, whatever, depending on whatever sporting code you're in. So safeguarding needs to be part of that compliance. Already in schools, before you can even be a coach, you have to do, your crim check and your sexual offenders check and all that. So organizations now need to make that part of the compliance part of whenever they hire anyone or whenever they consider anyone. And then should they be found to fail, the only reason I feel like organizations don't take it serious is because there's no financial penalty associated with non-compliance. If you hit them in the pocket and they pay, that's where we're getting our resources. At some point, we can reuse those funds from that non-compliance to fund a small federation, like a federation that lady mentioned, where they work from the back of their car. And you help that federation with those funds. At the end of the day, it's not a nice thing to, I think it's crass that we have to link money as a form of punishment, but at the end of the day, if you hit them in the pockets where it hurts, I feel like that's where they'll listen. And that's where compliance will now be mandated. It's almost like going to university. You need to have your matric, you need to have your bachelor pass, you need to have your higher certificate to do a diploma. If we don't do that, and we give punishments, financial and or otherwise, I don't think people will take it, or federations will take it as serious as we are in this room.
Thank you. All right, I think we'll wrap up now. I think the biggest thing that came out of that goes back to the implementation of these wonderful policies that we have. And how effective we can actually be with their implementation to create safer spaces in sport for everybody that is involved, including the team managers and the athlete support personnel. I'd like to thank my students. Aren't these a wonderful bunch of up-and-coming young academics? So I'm very excited to see what they're going to bring to the table next. And when we look at the youth that is sitting here, I think, we are making strides, however big or small they are. We are making strides with these young women and with everybody that has attended here today. So thank you very much. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much to the University of Johannesburg for this very important panel. I actually did a story in December. There's a lady that came to me, my source. I can't say what she does because as journalists we'll call them a source. And a coach at one of the biggest clubs in South Africa was abusing players. And the problem with that story is it backfired because, like you said, I think it was Tumi who said, discipline and abuse. And the things that he said, I can't even repeat them here. But for the longest time, I feel like now I'm being victimized because the club said, no, we can't have you like a coach like this here coaching our women's team. But now the reaction is, you made this man lose his job because he said something that most men say. And I'm like, no, most men don't say that. So it becomes a thing of, like you were saying, protecting the protector as well. Because now I've reported on what happened to the players, but now the problem is you are trying to destroy this man, this poor man, you're destroying this poor man. So this is a very, very important panel. And lastly, it's the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture in the Western Cape. We're talking policy again. I know everything about policies now. We're talking policy again, creating equal opportunities for women and girls in sports through policy developments. The first speaker that I'm going to call is Ms. Crystal Pether, the Deputy Director, Clients and Scientific Supports Directorate, Sports Promotion, Department of Culture Affairs and Sports. Christelle is an experienced sports management professional with over a decade of expertise in driving strategic initiatives and fostering inclusivity within the sports sector. As the Deputy Director of Clients and Scientific Support Services at the Department of Culture Affairs and Sports, she plays a pivotal role in promoting sports development, empowering communities, and strengthening government structures. And then next, I'm going to call up Director Daniel Manuel, Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, Western Cape Government. Daniel Manuel is a dynamic and results-driven senior manager with extensive experience in stakeholder management, projects coordination, and strategic policy development. She has a proven track record in unlocking potential, driving innovative solutions, and aligning people, policy, and processes to deliver impactful outcomes. Daniel has led high-quality initiatives, including provincial infrastructure strategies, economic development programs, and large-scale community engagement projects. And then lastly, I'm going to ask the CEO of SSCN, Mr. Alan Williams, to join us on stage.
Right. What we forgot to tell you is that we save the best for last. Because if you look under your chair, there are checks from the department. So you stayed until the last, right, Crystal? So that means we all win here today. But thank you so much. So this is the last session for this day that's been absolutely amazing. Such wealth of knowledge, of networking, and obviously this wouldn't have been possible, Crystal, if it wasn't for your support and your vision, Danielle, from the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, Western Cape. So we know it's the graveyard shift, so we're just going to have a discussion with you. We're going to share a little bit about what they've done. So please don't run off. There's little snacks as well. You can just talk and network before we go. Some of us come very far. UJ all the way from the other side. Eastern Cape, Western Cape. We've got Zimbabwe in the house. We even have Mozambique from Access all the way now. So we're really thankful. So Crystal, let's just talk a little bit about your work in the department and what you're doing, to advance gender equality. Let's just have a discussion around that.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. I think it was important for us to be part of this initiative, and thank you so much for collaborating, and I think one of the things that we mention in our department is we call it the managed network model, and finding partners and finding those who share the vision in the various spaces for things such as women and girls in the space, disability sport, and just participation and getting people to be active. So in terms of my work, women and girls is but one part of it. I'm just going to, in a short little brief, explain to you what the client and scientific support is about. So Danielle, my colleague, is on the school sport and the development side, and then it's almost like a handing over of the baton when it comes to client and scientific support side. So I and my team, we work with sport federations, again partnerships. We as government cannot work by ourselves, we need civil society. So we work with sport federations and we work with sport clubs within the Western Cape to deliver sport from grassroots to glory. Part of that is our club development program, and in the club development program, we support clubs for over a 3-year period. There is a number of clubs that's on the current program. And then we also support federations with their development, transformation, and capacity building initiatives, which includes covering the gender spectrum, boys and girls. I said disability sport as well. There's various indicators related to disability sport, and that is also part of the various programs and also the disability federations in the space that we do support. Then going to high performance, we also have the academy space that's also under climate and scientific support, and again working from grassroots to glory. So that is just I'm going to unpack as we converse further, but it's just in a little bit of a nutshell what client and scientific support is about. Now when it comes to the women and girls aspect of it, I mentioned we work with partners like sport federations. It was, I think, in 2018 that we have done a desktop, actually, just by the statistics of the federations that apply for funding within the department. We have noted that the statistic in terms of participation of female, women and girls in the sport, and then also women and girls that were in leadership, and also females that were coaches, administrators, technical officials. So we kind of collected that data just by the federations. At the time, it was about 130 federations that participate or that we funded at the time. And we saw that there was a huge gap in the various areas such as women in leadership. I think if I recall, my memory recalls correctly, there were about 4 presidents in the space in comparison, female presidents, female women in leadership in comparison to their male counterparts within the sporting federation space. Furthermore, the participation of women and girls, specifically in the sport that was previously male-dominated, we also noted that the participation rates or the intentionality of having female participation within the code, such as football as an example, was significantly lower than that of the male in the sport. And then we then took it upon ourselves at the time to engage with all of the opportunities that we have with Sports Federation, to engage with federations, and this through, we call it our trilateral processes, where we engage and we create platforms to engage federations, to then take on, not take on, but to be intentional about conversing, about increasing participation for women in sport, creating opportunities to capacitate women in sport, basically having the difficult conversations about the limitations and the barriers that's existing for women in sport. So yeah, that is my section of the incline and scientific support, but we, like I said, we will continue speaking about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Danielle, over to you. With that surname, is there any relation to Trevor Manuel? Minister. Danielle, tell us, as the director at the department, what do you do? I know it's quite broad.
No, thank you very much. So firstly, we don't hand out checks. So sorry to disappoint around that. So I think a key theme, firstly, for me today was around collaboration, partnerships. And that's not only about financial exchanges, but also how we optimally utilize our resources and experience together. From a sport development perspective in the Western Cape, we don't do enough. We don't do enough. We do wonderful work, but we don't do enough, right? So sport development, as Crystal said, it's about mass participation. It's about getting every child, every human being to be active and participate in sport and recreation. So we have an after-school program, the MOD program, we have recreational centers, and we've got school sports as well. They are wonderful success stories. A success story here today is Logan. Logan was at a MOD center. So a MOD center is at a school, it's an after-school program, you have a caring and competent coach who's exposing learners to sport. So Logan started off at a primary school, right? And then she moved into high school. And that high school was also where we had a MOD program. Mass participation, opportunity and access, development and growth. So a safe space where learners can be exposed to all sorts of codes, right? But not only the exposure to the sport itself, also importantly, the exposure to a safe space, right? And the safe space, a key ingredient of our component is the coach. Right? The coach is competent, the coach is caring, and not only competent in the skill set, but also competent in providing the psychological safety. Right. So importantly, the previous speaker was up here today, Nikki. We have a partnership with Waves for Change, where our coaches are being trained in how to identify children who have trauma, right? But again, importantly, sport is not the answer to every experience that a child or human being has. It is part of an answer. So something key that also came out today was the whole of society solution, right? So there's not one solution to a problem. There's not one person or one organization that can fix a problem. So sport, we're part of that solution, but in partnership with like-minded individuals, with other departments as well. So in a summary, what we try to do is try to create an opportunity for every child, every human being, every resident in the Western Cape to have an opportunity to access either a sport or a recreational activity. And I want to emphasize the recreational opportunity, because it's not only about the competitive sport. It's also just playing because it's lekker, man. You know? Like, I need to leave here at 5:30 to go do something lekker.
Like play paddle?
Yeah, well, I can't afford paddle, but, you know, something like that. And I think that's the important part. You know, so the team is starting to speak about something called the third space. Right? Everybody goes to work, they go to university, they go to school, etc. But where's the third space that one occupies just to be? And that third space is sport and recreation. For some it is paddle, for some it is yoga, for some it's hopefully the Goga Olympics. Right? So Goga Olympics, it's something that Merle and her team does. Senior citizens, getting them to play and be active. So, in response to your question, we don't do enough, but we certainly do try. And the only way we can do more is with partners who want to do similar work that we want to do. And I think just to say, so I'm supported by my team, Afi and Merle, and they lead their programs. They design their programs to deliberately ensure that it is inclusive of women. Right? They have deliberate targets. Around 50% of their coaches must be female. They have success stories that we can share. But through networks, partnership like this, the idea is to do more and have greater impact.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I think it's also such a breath of fresh air to hear public servants saying we don't do enough, because we don't hear that often. But also, maybe just to throw it out to you, both of you, is like, when you say not enough, we also understand that government can't do it on their own. It's impossible. It's a mammoth task out there, right? So how do we, and I think collaboration is one of the key areas that we're talking about, right? So what are some of the things that we can do, right? I love what Prof. Cora, and I'm gonna say what you say, and I also want to throw this out to us as well in terms of not doing enough, but also how do you measure the impact of the Western Cape government? There's a saying, and I hope I'm going to coin it right, say it right: if you can't measure it, we can't manage it. So how do you manage and measure success? You know, Logan's story is just one story, but this province, this country, this continent is so massive. How do we get more Logans out there, right? So let's talk about that.
Wow, Ellen, that's a big one. I think Prof said it earlier on this morning about actually measuring impact. It's difficult to measure, and I think impact you can measure over an extensive period of time. I think if you look at many of the Harvard research and all of these universities that does really impact studies, it is over 30, 40, 50 years. So it is difficult, but I think the low-hanging fruits are measurable, and that's what Prof was mentioning. One of those things for us in our space is capacitation, as an example. We are unable to reach everybody, but if we develop, like Danielle said, that coach that can reach the people within he or her community, then we can measure how many of those persons that we have impacted. And by extension, you know, you can then see what that person is doing in their space, and then you can tangibly see the impact. So those are, for me, the small wins. And just in terms of being intentional, Danielle can attest to this, we have been intentional about developing indicators within our space to capacitate women and girls, to capacitate females within the technical aspect, within the coaching space, also going as far as encouraging sport federations who we fund to develop leaders within the space, that we are now almost at a 50% turnaround from when we started in 2018, where we only had 4 female presidents, to almost 50% female presidency within the federation space. So those are measurable turnarounds as an example. So that's just but one of the areas that I feel that we can tangibly see change, and it's the small, low-hanging fruits.
So, I mean, to answer the first question around measuring change and impact, I think it's something that we should intentionally do, and we can do within government. So it's possibly something that we don't do very well. So the data, the qualitative data, quantitative data rather, and then the qualitative stories that show we have changed lives, and we have created opportunities in terms of numbers with the resources that we have, right? So, I mean, if you look at the limited resources that sport and recreation gets, the impact is significant. So the number might seem low, but in terms of what we have, it's huge. And I think we need to make a more deliberate effort to quantify, qualify the impact of sport, right? Because when people think about crime, for example, and our unsafe communities, they think sport. When people think about the health issues and obesity and mental health, sport is part of the solution, right? But all our funding goes towards nurses, hospitals, you know, whereas we could have prevented all of that. So I think it's upon us as change makers, as everybody who's involved in sport, to quantify the impact of our work. And when we do that, hopefully we'll leverage more funding, right? So we've got to be more deliberate around impact and M&E as a collective. And then your first question was around partnerships, yeah? So practically, you know, for me, I'd like to see all tertiary institutions, we all come together and we problem solve together, right? Because we've got to start building on our collective knowledge and our collective expertise and our collective resources. So practically, we have the partnership I spoke about with Waves for Change, for example, where they're training our coaches, capacitating them. Practically, we've got a partnership with North Link, where we are hosting some of their interns and they're gaining experience and so forth. And so these partnerships, you know, we can have wonderful agreements, but they need to translate into something practical, where there's an actual sharing of resources, sharing of knowledge, sharing of experiences. And, you know, with the performance, we've got to be ambitious and bold with what it is we want to do. And we've got to accept that we're going to fail, right? Because we have failed. And so for me, the first step is to accept that failure and a commitment to failing forward. You know, so we learn together. And the only way we're going to learn together, the last conversation was a lot around trust. You know, so you want the trust between the athlete and the coach, etc. But we also need the trust between each other as partners, where we can start having difficult conversations and holding each other accountable. You know, we need to be able to say, man, every time government comes, it can't just be about a check. Because guess what? There's not enough money anymore. So let's have a different conversation. And let's have these difficult conversations if we really want to utilize sports optimally for everybody.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think also, you know, when we also look at sport, the entire ecosystem of sport in the country, you don't only have federations and clubs, you've got NGOs, you've got the business sector, you've got academia, all of us in that space. But I think sometimes we are so territorial on certain things, you know, and when you think about resources, 2 weeks ago we were at the FIX conference. I don't know who all was there, massive conference. They're talking about trillions of euros being pumped into sport. And one would ask the question, how much of that money will really get down to the structures that need it, right? And you also find the reinvention of certain things. For instance, if federations are doing what they do well, that is around talent identification and that, then fantastic. On the other hand, you have the NGOs that are really in the space around sport for all and recreation. So a few years ago, we actually met with the national lotteries because they had a kind of criteria when NGOs used to go to the lottery to look for funding. They would say, okay, which federation do you belong to? And obviously some NGOs don't belong to federations, right? And so my question would be also to government, especially like in the Western Cape, and we're talking to the National Department of Sport, Arts and Cultures, that there are structures in place already where NGOs are affiliated. And we've managed to tweak that with the national lotteries to say, not all NGOs are affiliated to federations. And so what they've done is they've changed it, because when you go to the lottery, they would say, well, you just capped because you're a club or whatever, you're only capped to X amount of funding that you can get. But they've changed that now. So we're still yet to meet with them in terms of that. So the question, I think what I'm asking, and partly a comment, is to say, you know, how do NGOs then get the recognition fully from the departments? We know that sometimes in the past that NGOs have taken a lot of flack because they don't have their house in order, they don't have governance in order, and yet they're coming to look for partnerships with government.
Yeah, I mean, of course government wants to partner with the civil society. I mean, so that's a given. The question is, what shape does that partnership take? Is it just in the shape of funding? Is it purely transactional? And if it can't only be a funding partnership. It's got to be more, right? And if it's more than funding, then the governance and compliance issues are not that huge, right? If you're doing great work, we're doing great work, then at an operational level, we meet and we partner. And we do greater work together. But the conversation that I feel should be had is when NGOs are functional, and when their governance is in place, how do they access the funding at the conference you were at last week, right? So is development finance serious about funding? And development finance, they are loans. It's not grants. So we need to distinguish between the two.
So you were there 2 weeks ago?
I was not there.
You sound like you were there.
No, I was not there. But I think a development bank, development finance, people often think it's a grant. It's a loan that must be paid back with interest. So what we need to access is grant funding, CSI funding, through the big corporates. And I think there's more power if government and civil society does that together. Right? If we're on one page and we clear that within the ecosystem, this is the gap. Right? So if earlier on rugby spoke about school sport and they spoke about transport, the gap. So school sports, rugby, transport's a gap. Who's a possible private partner to fill that gap? And to do that collectively. So in my mind, there's so much more power in the collective, in the we, rather than the I. Yeah?
Do you want to add to that, Crystal?
I think she covered us.
Yeah. I've just been told people want to go play paddle. So what we're going to do is, we're going to just take some questions from the floor. Please, if you have any questions for these two wonderful ladies. And we will then conclude this fantastic day that we had. Thanks. Yeah. Or do you want to add anything? Avi? Avi and Mil, is there anything you would like to add?
Okay, just to add, I think Danielle mentioned we more on our program, more on women in management, and also our coaches that we train
we are based in women. And on top of that, we make sure all these women are coming from the same community that these schools are at, because it creates a safe, even more safer space for them, because they feel proud even walking in those streets. The kids are calling them coach, so they are safe. So it's more about safety also on our side, on how we protect the women around the communities. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think because of time, let's get into the questions. Maybe I can answer some of the questions.
Here we have 2 hands over here.
2 questions, very quick questions. Thank you very much for your presentations. First, I would like to know if you have a system of the internal evaluation of your programs. The second is, how do you interact with other ministries? Because sport is not standing alone. We recognize this. And the third, in order to materialize what you are saying, the last statement, is what about your communication strategy with the civil society and other partners?
Can you hold on to your question before this thought goes, and then you can answer Danielle, and we'll come to you.
So, thank you very much for the question. So it's that time of the day where 3 questions is a lot to hold, so that's why I said let's respond first. So in terms of communication strategy, it's not the greatest, right? So we need to be deliberate around engaging partners, around bringing civil society together, bringing all tertiary institutions together, and deliberately have those conversations. Because it is so easy to focus on what is in your annual performance plan. I must just do this. These are my targets that I've set for myself, right? But so communication and dialogue and conversation with partners is definitely something that we can do better. Right? So yes, we have one-on-one engagements. If there's a willing partner and you know that the first date is good and the second date is good, then we rock and we roll. But we need to be more intentional about being more inclusive with that. In terms of that was the first and the second question. The middle question in between was around our internal M&E processes. So internal M&E processes, so qualitative data, quantitative data, we count. Right? So we're good with counting the numbers. So we can tell you how many participants attend the program. We can tell you how many teams we send to national championships. We can tell you how many females participate at our different centers. We can do that. Can we do impact and tell you that we have followed Logan? No. Right? So M&E, yes. Impact, as Crystal said, not so great, right? Because it's about internal capacity, but it's also about being intentional and saying that Logan participated in a mod program in primary school and high school. But do we know where Logan is 10 years later? Only if she shows up on TV, maybe. You know, so that's the immediate answer. But Crystal, please add.
I just want to add to what Danielle is saying. Yeah, like if you take a Logan for an example, yes, like I won't be able to tell you, she might have even been part of our club development program, and many other Logans like her. Or I know for a fact she's not part of our academy system. But yes, we're counting numbers. We want to get to the point where we are able to say, this is the impact that we've had. This is how we started from a school sport or grassroots level, and the Logans of the world came through the various avenues into our high performance pro or academy system program, and look at her, she's a Springbok or she's at a global stage. That is where we want to get to. That is the shift that we are trying to do. And I think it's also from where we're coming from culturally, internally in the government space. We are shifting the culture of what we are doing also to be more impact driven. But we're not there yet. But it's what we are striving towards to get to that point. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add. Yes.
So my question is, you mentioned something about governance. So governance is something that is deteriorating within our sporting environments. We don't know what goes where, who does what, and the overall operation of our sport. So my question to you is, how do you ensure effective sport governance to facilitate successful and sustainable sport development?
Yeah, that's a big question, Jan. So, in the sport ecosystem, right, firstly we acknowledge that there are many stakeholders, many role players, and everybody has a role to play. The relationship between government and federation, in my view, and is happening, so there would be a memorandum of understanding with a federation. So our expectation now is that a federation submits a 5-year plan, right? So whether it's rugby, whether it's softball, whether it's tennis, whatever, here's the federation, here's my 5-year plan. This is what I want to do for school sport. This is my developmental agenda. This is what I'm doing for competitive sports, etc., etc. Then Crystal mentioned the trilateral engagements. We engage with federations. You've shared your vision, we've shared our vision. So here's a memorandum of agreement. Let's commit to how we're going to work together and support each other. But that MOU, MOA, again, shouldn't just be about funding. It shouldn't just be, as the department, we are giving you a check. And you must sign here for that check, and you must do A, B, and C. It's got to be more. It's got to be where we say, this is the vision for this particular code, right? And bringing on more role players to be part of achieving that vision. So governance and accountability, it's around everybody understanding what their role is, formalizing that, and then having structures like the trilaterals where we hold each other accountable. And that accountability must be geared towards a long-term plan. And that long-term plan, in my view, needs to be bold and ambitious, right? And then we can set shorter-term goals for each other, goals that we know we can incrementally achieve. But what's important is we've got the North Star, and the North Star is every child has a right to play. Everyone should have the right to possibly become an Olympic athlete. Yeah.
I think Danielle covered us, but I just wanted to add that these platforms do exist, like Danielle mentioned, the trilaterals, for an example. We engage at that platform, and it's not just us and the Sport Federation, it's also the sport councils or the Provincial Sport Confederation that is part of that space. So we have the 3-way, 4-way conversation of about accountability, but it's still not enough. We are not at the point yet where we have signed. This is what we are encouraging. When we do sit in the trilateral, for example, we have just had it now, January, February, the engagements. And we actually challenge federations to look at the various aspects like women and girls, like their disability sport, increasing participation, creating more platforms, what are the next level, and to change the thinking. Because remember, some of the persons that's in the federation space are volunteers. They didn't go and study the things, for example, that myself or business people, they are not yet that way in terms of the thinking processes. It's just about, some of them are just about fun and just about getting an activity done. So the conversation is continuous conversation in the space. And yes, it's not just about the funding. One of the things that we're also challenging federations is to recognize that there might be other stakeholders or NGOs in the space that can help them achieve what they are trying to achieve, and to use the ecosystem where they are to empower the federation, and even at the club level, because we're seeing it in club development. For an example, we support clubs to participate over a 3-year period on the club development program, but at the end of it, we are, through obviously capacity building, we provide transportation, etc. But the idea is for the clubs to become self-sustainable. So what do we need to do in that aspect? So we check whether or not a club is then registered as an MPO or companies so that they can also get other sources of funding. So it is to help them in the networking aspect of it as well. And even in that case, we've identified that there are some areas that needs, for example, if we did financial management courses, we need to shift it to PR or marketing, that we capacitate in that regard. But it's a continuous, and we are not at the point yet where we are able to say we are signing a 5-year or an SLA, and this is what the Federation is going to be delivering over the next 5 years. And these are the markers of accountability, but that is something we are striving towards. And those are the difficult conversations of internally in our directorates and within the chief directorate and within the department. How do we work closer together, because these are all the gaps. As the custodians of sport, which is the federations, how do we then work with them and other civil society structures to get to the same outcome and create a healthy sport ecosystem?
So just one thing I want to add to that. So sport is also predominantly run on a culture of volunteerism, right? So Merle, for example, her program, they lead indigenous games. And the weekend, they had their AGM meetings and so forth. But these are passionate, committed community leaders who do it for the love of the game, right? So they come to these workshops, they come to capacity building sessions, but in a volunteer capacity. So we've all heard the saying that, some federations operate out of the boot of the car. So at what stage do we professionalize sport administration, right? One of the questions was around intergovernmental coordination within departments. And within provincial government, that's big. So provincial government's priorities are safety, well-being, and jobs. And they clearly identify sport being part of all of that, right? So if we understand the value of sport in creating safe spaces, psychologically and physically, sport as an industry in creating jobs, and we clearly understand the power of sport in well-being, physical and psychological well-being. So is sport appropriately funded? Right? Is sport professional? Why is sport not as professional as nursing and teaching? And how do we get it to that level? So one element is, yes, capacity building, but there's also this notion that it's okay for sport to be operated on a basis of volunteerism. So just,
Okay, we'll take the last 2 questions and we have to close. Thanks.
Crystal and Danielle, thank you for touching on volunteerism, because that's the basis of my question. I was just having a conversation now that we devalue the importance and the impact of human capital. Because most of the times, yes, there's no money, but some of us are living proof of human capital. I didn't have money to give back, but all I could do was volunteer. And eventually, because I was in those spaces, because I volunteered, I ended up where I ended up. I moved straight from Joburg to Cape Town for work. And I didn't know anyone in Cape Town, but based off of volunteerism. I'm a beneficiary of CATHSETA. I'm a beneficiary of an internship I got where I happened to say, I'm going to the University of Johannesburg. I don't have money to pay for this. CATHSETA funded me all the way until my honors degree. So people, do not invalidate the importance of volunteering. It will get you far. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, I've been paid 300 Rand for a tournament. Do not look down on volunteering, because you're going to be in a space and meet someone who is going to change your life. So please do not ever look down on it.
Good afternoon to everyone. Firstly, let me just say thank you to the public representatives for you guys accepting that you've not done well. As an entrepreneur, I'm just going to be straight on with you guys. Firstly, first question is, why is our sports infrastructure going to ruins. Okay, it's nationally, even the World Cup stadiums that were built in 2010, they're going into ruins. As an entrepreneur, if you get involved in sport, you're spending your own money, your own family money, and then what happens is, from experience, there's too much bureaucracy. Why? Too much red tape, too much misappropriation of money. Like the gentleman did mention, billions and trillions are coming to the sport. In our country, most companies on their CSI funds, accounts are dormant because there's too much misappropriation. My question is to you, government representatives. Remember, without sport, I'm going to say something, without volunteers, whether people who are passionate about sport, the grassroots, business people who fund from their own pocket money and families, and then the last thing is they need is government standing on their way. In South Africa currently, unorganized sport, in brackets, is bigger than professional sport. That's a fact. Do you have numbers for that? Because people are tired of bureaucracy. They spend their money and then they get subjected to bureaucracy, people in power, in most cases, or even take their innovation ideas, and then they run them for a few years and then it dies. The reality is our youth is in trouble in this country. And sport is the only hope they have. I always use an example to coaches in soccer especially to say, remember when you meet a young man, a young girl, and they come into your team, remember sport, whatever code of sport they may be involved in, it's like they are drugged. If they don't have it as a fix, you are pushing them somewhere worse. So you guys are talking about, what do you call it, safeguarding? Let me ask a question to people at SARU. Even in soccer, the F word is used like loosely. Is it part of safeguarding? It's not. Okay. But kids get offended by that, and they cry, and parents as well, they see it as well. And it's just messy. And as an African, number one, I'm not American, I'm not European. You know, there's a certain language you should use in public, right? I guess what I would say is all the academics, please go down to the roots really where things are happening. Because I feel as in professional sport, stadiums are empty. And people are blaming so-called government. I believe in a democratic state, I'm the government. The panel, they are just representatives. We are the government. And we initiate things from the ground, either as activists, as entrepreneurs, as business people. We spend our own money. And the last thing we need is bureaucracy that is rampant in South Africa. Facilities are going to ruins. Why must more money be invested into sport? If you can just answer me on that. Because, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think partly you've answered your own question, but it's okay. I would say Danielle and Crystal maybe touch on it, and then some parting remarks, concluding remarks. So I don't know who's going to go first.
Okay, so the question I heard is around infrastructure, sport infrastructure. Infrastructure is expensive, we all know that. Government's priority is certainly to maintain what we currently have and to do that as best we can, maintain the current infrastructure that we do have, right? to expand the infrastructure, sport infrastructure specifically, it is about partnerships. And it is not, infrastructure is not the responsibility of one sphere of government. It's local government, provincial government, and national government. But again, what we've been saying, it's about partnerships. Universities have wonderful infrastructure. Certain schools have wonderful infrastructure. Other schools don't. So how do we bring resources together? So that is my response. It's a sign, young, that you want to go play paddle. So my concluding remarks is, together we can do more. It's that simple. And it's not always about money. It's about the wealth of wisdom and knowledge that we have here. And I think with sport and recreation, we are privileged because much of it is driven by passion. So I often say that, I love my job. And the reason I love my job is because we are the department of hope, happiness, and joy. We're the only department that brings something lekker, jong. I mean, who doesn't want to go to a sports event or a recreational event? Sports brings happiness. It brings a geest like no other. So my parting remarks are, as public servants, we serve with pleasure. And we accept that more can be done with civil society, with tertiary institutions, and with business. And that's me. Thank you.
I don't even think I need to add to that. I think Danielle covered us. But just to emphasize the point of, we cannot work in isolation. We need civil society, we need private partnerships. As a collective, we are able to work towards getting to the point where we want to be. I think Danielle also mentioned that part of our mandate is for the upkeep of facilities, and that is what we do in our spaces, to work and the maintenance, etc. But it's not government's responsibility alone. It is everybody's responsibility. Unfortunately for government, and unfortunately or fortunately, we are the representatives here today to answer this difficult question. But it filters from national all the way down. It needs to be working as a collective. And hopefully, like Danielle spoke about hope, Danielle say hope, joy, and happiness. I often emphasize to the federations, we are hope dealers. We are hope dealers. And we are always hopeful that, the small little things that we are doing will have significant reach and impact. And if we can change one thing, one step at a time, then we take the small wins as building blocks to get where we need to be. But the fact that we have the ability to have these difficult conversations here today, I think it's already a step in the right direction. So thank you very much.
Let's give them a huge round of applause. Please stay, don't go. I think, so we've come to the close of a wonderful day here today. And I think the only thing that's left for me to do is a few acknowledgements. But I want to say also that everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think maybe the question would be with the infrastructure is, why is it working in other areas? And, because sometimes we have this ability just to build and those things become white elephants. There is enough infrastructure around in the country. It's about management, and it's about leadership, and it's about innovation. So on that note, just a few acknowledgements. I know we've kept you waiting a bit long, but do not rush off. They've prepared something there. You can take it as patkos with you if you go. So just a few acknowledgements as we conclude today's powerful session. We will make some of the recordings available and a report that will come from this session that we will share on our database. But But Crystal, I mean, this wouldn't have been happening if it wasn't through your support and your department's support by putting this platform together from this morning until this evening. So let's give another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the remarkable women who have not only shown up today, but have also shared their experiences, wisdom, and strength. Some of them have left. We had some powerful panels. A special thank you to Deputy Minister for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, Minister Steve Lesike, for your unwavering support and commitment to gender equality. Minister Ricardo McKenzie and the Western Cape Department of Happiness, Joy and Hope. Western Cape Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport, represented by him and obviously Ms. Crystal Pother for making this event possible. The Artscape team, Tanya, Guy and David, for providing this incredible venue. Our distinguished panelists who have traveled from near and far to share their journeys and inspire a new generation of champions. I think the UJ panel was really brilliant. I think we need to think about, more of these discussions to help us. And then also Botha from 756 for your dedication to creating the look and feel of this conference, working behind the scenes to ensure excellence. And then we have two phenomenal women, Professor Cora Burnett. Let's give her a round of applause. And Ms. Krina Govender, who's sitting in Lausanne, Switzerland, right? These two ladies were the masterminds behind this event, whose ideas and leadership have brought this vision to life. Without you, Prof. and Krina, this wouldn't have been possible. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the SSCN team and my team, I'm not going to mention everyone. I want to thank you for being part of this journey, and we look forward to seeing you in 2026. God bless and travel safe. Thank you.